You're listening to Puma Podcast.
When trouble started, it was about secession. It was about Moro homeland. But now there's a wave of new ideas coming in that it could be religion,
An Islamic State.
an Islamic State, which is different from a Moro homeland.
Hello, ako po si Roby Alampay, Puma Podcast, and you're listening to Teka Teka. In this episode,
Because Sunday's bombing need planning, resources, intelligence. The military said it was in retaliation because there were 7 dead in ISIS in Mindanao. I don't buy that. The trigger was the death of Abu Zakaria last July.
on December 3, a bomb attack at a gymnasium in Mindanao State University in Marawi killed 4 people and injured around 46 others. The explosion took place during a Sunday Catholic Mass. It set off unease and many questions in the whole of Mindanao. The Dawla Islamiyya Maute group, members of which are often referred to as supporters of ISIS, have been linked to the attack. Given the peace process in Mindanao and the push and continuing efforts to establish and stabilize a government for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, the blast reignited many questions. There are some things we now know, some things we still do not know about the explosion. I and Veronica, senior editor of Teka Teka, spoke with 2 journalists in Mindanao who have been covering the southern Philippines for decades. We asked them to share what the incident means for the short term, as well as the longer view questions we should all be asking.
I am Froilan Gallardo. I work for Mindanews and I also string for other outlets, Rockler, AP, News, and what have you.
I'm Bobby Timonera, Editor-in-Chief of Mindanews. I've been covering Marawi since the late 1980s.
When the bombing happened, where were you? And what was your reaction?
Actually, I was in bed, sleeping. It was Sunday. Suddenly, around 7:45, one of my former schoolmate in MSU, called me up and said there was a bombing. The first figure that he gave was around 10 dead. So that woke me up. I called up Bobby and I advised that I will proceed to MSU to cover the bombing. I'm based here in Cagayan de Oro. It's a 3-hour, 4-hour ride to MSU in Marawi. Bobby joined me, and when we reached MSU, I asked Bobby that we should go to the gym first.
Before we went to the gym, we saw students with their bags waiting for the ride home. And then may mga nakakonvoy na rin na mga van and jeepneys full of students going out.
Most people, especially outside of Mindanao, have no idea what Marawi looks like, and for that matter, what MSU looks like. What does it look like?
MSU is a state campus that's around 4,000 hectares on the mountain top, on top the Marawi city. It's one of the most beautiful campus that I've seen. Most of the population there before was even with Christians and Muslims and Maranaos. So right now, but the population is, because of the Marawi 2017 seeds and now the rush of bombing, the student population has dropped into 15,000 to 18,000 with 20% Christians. Before it used to be Christians that were more. But right now, most of the families there, Christians, teachers and workers have settled in Marawi with houses provided by the school. Then the Muslims also bought some land inside 2,000 reservation, 4,000 reservation land.
Wait, linawin ko lang yan, 4,000 hectares?
It is a big campus, like what, maybe UPLB, something like that. There's a golf course inside.
So it's really a, it's a quiet, idyllic place. UP Los Baños, actually, imagine ko nga rin.
Yeah, it's more like UP Los Baños, but right now it's a thriving community already with many commercial districts like UP Los Baños, where it used to be just schools, school buildings, classrooms. Now the MSU have a lot of private establishments. It's one of the problems of the school because many of the buildings are illegally built by people who managed to get land titles.
And then MSU is inside Marawi. But it was not part of the devastation of the Marawi siege.
Malayo siya from downtown, mga 5 kilometers away.
Okay. So it was spared from what happened to Marawi City.
Yes, except for the evacuation din ng mga students.
I see. Where do we stand now? You said initially at that 7:45 morning, Froy, initial report sa'yo, 10. Where do we stand right now in terms of the latest updates on how devastating that attack was?
There are about 4 dead right now. Teachers, a couple of professors, and two students. 4 dead. The Lanao del Sur Provincial Disaster Risk Reduction Management Office just updated that there were 72 wounded students, workers.
So ano nang alam natin in terms of why this happened?
It's so you have to study everything because it's not a simply bang story. Again, we have to look at the context of the Bangsamoro land and religion to fully understand the problem.
Pero officially, the military and the police linking the incident to ISIS-inspired militants. So I think that's all we can say for now because everything else is marites.
But even if we can't explain everything right now, what are some basic things that people need to understand?
People need to understand the ISIS, even with how hostile they are, how violent they are, they still enjoy some level of support from their families. And when you talk about the Maranao culture, families is the key plays a key role to their culture and the relationship. So even if there are only 10 or 5 extremists with, shall we say, with a Mauti, they can still operate. That's what happened in the bombing.
Ano ibig sabihin mo? What are you trying to say? Na, people need to understand that as violent as ISIS is, they still
because there's so many commanders who said that ISIS is no more, that ISIS is a spent force, but yet they were able to mount this kind of operations, well planned, well executed, and played into one of the most key issue in MSU or in Mindanao, the Christians and the Muslims.
Lanao Sur, where Marawi is located, since late 1980s pa ako nagko-cover sa Marawi, it is an area where kidnapping is rampant. Like in Iligan, which is a neighboring city, there were kidnappings where the victims were brought to Marawi. And then during elections, usually we prefer going to Marawi early because the coverage is far more exciting. Meaning there's,
Magulo.
sad to say, sa mga journalists, naghanap talaga ng mga exciting coverage, di ba? So that's why we go there. Halos mawala na yung pangalan namin sa listahan ng Comelec in our cities because we go to Lanao Sur and Marawi to do coverage. So ganong situation niya na aside from the Rido, of course, yung gera between clans, no? Relative to relative. And then I remember in the late 1980s, si Atty. Yorak, when she was with Comelec, was telling one official in Marawi na siguro hindi na kayo dapat mag-election dito, i-appoint na lang to lessen the violence. So parang ganung setting na mas frequent talaga mangyari ang mga incidents in Marawi and Lanao del Sur.
But two things, Bobby. One is, sige, yung gulo, yung chaos, you mentioned Rido, Froy mentioned Christian Muslim tensions. But you also brought us back to the context of the 1990s. I mean, in all of those things, hindi ba nagbago yun? Hindi ba nag-lessen yun? For example, to that point, Froy, of Muslim-Christian tensions, hindi ba nagbago yun? Especially given or is it because precisely of the Christian Muslim mix in MSU, for example?
I would like to point out na yung sa bombing mismo, a lot of with survivors told me that it was the Muslim Maranaos who helped them out from the gym. It was the Maranaos who offered vehicles to bring them to the hospitals. Nandun lahat ang Maranao. What I mean is, the Maranaos and Christians are very, really, they have come to a point that they can live peacefully, coexistently with each other. The problem lang is, there are these elements, these ISIS, who thinks otherwise. Yun lang, they are trying to break a wedge between the two. But most Maranaos, most Christians are great friends.
Quick question lang. We understand, of course, that most Maranaos are Muslims, but Maranao is an ethnic group. Muslim and Christian, of course, is religious. But are you using Maranao and Muslim interchangeably here?
Yeah, I use it interchangeably.
Okay, so just to make sure I get this right, you're saying the ISIS is driving the wedge. They are not representative of the tension. They're trying to stir up the tension. When we refer to Muslim-Christian communities, to the Muslim-Christian relationship, actually the baseline is they can coexist. And ISIS doing this is just trying to stir up tension all over again.
Yes.
We will take a short break, but when we return, we continue to explore with Froy and Bobby the larger questions we should keep in mind to keep us above the fray of the emotional and political discussions still swirling around a lot of still undetermined matters in MSU, Marawi, and Mindanao in general.
Tanong ko actually, ano yung trigger? Kasi previous to this bombing, nagkaroon nga ng elections. You mentioned elections earlier as a parang parating reason for some of the violence. So, yung trigger for this Sunday's bombing?
I don't think the elections triggered the violence. It was the arrest of the last name, Abu Zakaria, was killed in last July. I think that was the trigger. because Sunday's bombing need planning, resources, and intelligence. So it was not a spur of the moment of the military said. It was the spur of, it was in retaliation because there were 7 dead in ISIS in Maguindanao. I don't buy that. The trigger was the death of Abu Zakaria last July.
Why MSU? Is there a particular place that MSU has in the heart or in the emotions or in the culture of Marawi or Lanao del Sur? Bakit sa MSU?
But in the first place, MSU is a melting ground of the Muslim, the Maranaos and the Christians. Plenty of good relationship. But remember, it's not the first time that MSU became a hiding place for the ISIS. First, yung bombing suspect ng Cagayan de Oro ng Dungon hid in MSU. That's why there was a raid in 2015 on one of the dormitories of MSU. The second was there are many killings in the run-up of the 2017 seats that were credited, and most students suspect were done by the ISIS. Like there were so many underreported cases in MSU before the run-up of 2017. So it's not just last Sunday that nangyari ito.
So in other words, it wasn't a strike on a symbolic place. Rather, matagal ng hotbed talaga yung area na yan. Especially given the 4,000 hectares in the community that has built it up.
Basically, it's a soft target for the ISIS.
Right. As a soft target, it's precisely because they already have some followers inside within that community. It's soft in the terms na parang ka nagpasabog sa sarili mong bakuran.
Correct. Yeah, no. Because in 2017, I was told that there were many ISIS supporters among the students. I tried to interview them, but most of them went underground.
If you're one group who wants to get the attention of many people, no, far and wide, kung mag-target ka ng victims, doon ka sa victims na mas malayo ang maabot na reaction, di ba? So, MSU and then in a Catholic Mass. So, ang mga andyan are people from different places of Mindanao. So, ang naging effect, mas malayo as far as Davao, no, as far as Zamboanga, and everywhere else na nagpanic yung buong Mindanao dahil ang mga parents were concerned and thus their government officials were concerned. So, everybody came to, in an attempt to rescue the students and ferry them out of MSU. So, kung publicity ang gusto mo, MSU would be the best target in Marawi.
I think I agree with Bobby because naambos si Governor Adjung but it didn't generate so much attention. Ito, school, the ingredients are there. School, bombing in between Christians and against Christian worshippers. Yun, nandun. Kaya nga, it caught up with international attention.
Why was government and even the military, ito lang impression ko, it was uncharacteristic of them in the first 2 days to really stress na we're not gonna comment immediately. They only said, I think there were some very vague statements in the first 2 days. Why were they so cautious, you think?
Because somebody in Manila wants to break the news. Somebody in Manila wants to break the news. For example, this morning, 2 days ago, one of the suspects was arrested. And they released the story this morning. And when I called up the Lanao del Sur police and military, they told me it's Manila that will break the news. And sure, it was Manila who break the news. Simple as that.
What does this do now? I mean, we have an idea about the motives of ISIS, but what do you expect to be the actual impact of this in the short and in the long term?
For one, hindi pa naman definite was really behind it, diba? Although the military has linked the ISIS inspired multi-group. But for now, we really couldn't tell. Although the ISIS also admitted, but beyond that, wala na ibang sinabi.
So are you saying you're still open na it's possible na may iba?
I don't know, no? So that's why sinabi ko hanggang official statements lang tayo. So for now, the official statements come from the police and the military.
Same question kay Froy kanina. Are you using ISIS and Maute Group interchangeably? Or is Maute still auditioning to ISIS?
They're inspired. Maute is inspired by the ISIS. They form a group called Dawla Islamiyah after 2017. But again, referring to that question, last question of yours, I think the impact right now is it through an atmosphere of fear among the Christians all over Mindanao. When they now go to the church, they go to the malls during the Christmas season. They're all wary of the bombs. Right now in Cagayan de Oro, they cannot hold a park party without a lot of policemen guarding it. That's that impact of that last Sunday's bombing.
Okay. But why? Gusto ko lang malinawan yung when you, or for that matter, when the military or the government says ISIS, that's Maute.
Yeah. Mindanews used the description of ISIS inspired or Dawla inspired Maute.
Dawla is being inspired by ISIS, diba?
Yun yung tanong ko. Why that qualifier? Why not just say, why inspired? Because it stops short of...
This is a very foreign religion to them, to the Mindanao, Roby. Basically, when the secession here, when trouble started, it was about secession. It was about Moro homeland. But now there's a wave of new ideas coming in that it could be religion,
An Islamic State.
Which is different from a Moro homeland.
Most Filipinos to this day cannot make a distinction between Moro and Muslim.
A Moro homeland doesn't mean all Muslims, because Moro, we call it a people, Southern Mindanao. It can be Christian, Lumad, that's basically yearning for the Moro homeland, the homeland that was they enjoy without being captured or seized by the Spanish or American during that period. That's why it's called Bangsamoro homeland. that's a very, very, very political issue. ISIS wanted the Philippines to be a separate Asian province. Their Asian, province that they could call their own. That they could not do it in Indonesia, they could not do it in Malaysia, but they felt that the Philippines is the weakest link among the Asian, which they could strive to have an Asian caliphate for them.
And that's what you mean when you say that actually that's a very alien and very different religion.
It's very alien. Because most of the fighters here were raised in the images and idealism of Nor Miswari and Sim Salamat Murad. Those are freedom fighters. Here, you can call the ISIS as freedom fighters.
Isa na lang pala akong tanong. Kasi parang yung huling balita is ang dami na ngang estudyante na umalis. Ano na situation ng classes? Not just in MSU but in other schools.
As of Wednesday, 694 students went home. So paano yun? They come back. The school said that they will start fielding buses again in Cagayan de Oro and Iligan starting tomorrow because the school wants them to return because it's the final examination for the next 2 weeks.
Mahirap kasi dyan sa students. Kasi kung wala sana siege that happened in 2017, mas mahirap mag-decide umalis, no? So kung ikaw yung parents from far away, may gulong nag-umpisa, and then with the experience ng siege noon, baka matrap yung anak mo doon. So, as early as possible, get out na. Kasi, like we talked with one MSU official on that day, na blame niya yung social media for painting the situation so bad that the parents were forcing their children to leave. Kaya lang, sabi niya naman, kung ang anak niya nasa malayong lugar at may gulo din, umamin din siya na, I will have to pull out my child, di ba? So, ganong situation yon. So, for me naman, kung ako magulang, may anak ako doon, okay na sa akin madelay ka ng 1 year basta buhay ka. So, parang ganon yung tingin ng ibang parents.
Correct. You cannot blame the parents.
We've talked about what we know. We've talked about what we don't know. As the story continues to unfold, what are questions that are important for people to ask?
Siguro lang, how can we be safe? No, that's one. Kasi as mentioned kanina, no, on the Christian side, although we're not trying to put some division, no, pero dahil it was a Catholic Mass, the non-Maranaos are worried of their safety in MSU, in Marawi, and probably even outside. Diba? Some neighboring cities suspended classes also right after the bombing. So we're concerned of the safety. So we'd like to get assurances how safe are we.
What about you, Froy? What are some questions that you would leave?
I would love people to look at the roots of these problems. Look at the dynamics. Ang lalim sa story. What is Bangsamoro homeland? What does ISIS really want? It's not a homeland for the Moros. No. They want a caliphate province for their own caliphate province in Asia. That's the two distinctive difference.
Ano kasi, Roby, sa MSU, very strong yung, kahit sa religious level, Muslims and Christians, yung interfaith dialogue, medyo malakas siya dyan. And even when you talk religion, and then you talk about the Moro and the non-Moro in the area, I do not really see infighting. No? So, hindi mo masabi. So, ang relationship, okay. So, somebody wants to probably chase that. And so, how to stop that would be maybe for the government to prevent, not to solve. It's a very sophisticated issue. Ang laking issue na matagal masasolve for peace to reign, not just in Marawi but probably in Mindanao. No? Medyo malaking trabaho pa para wala nang mga kaguluhan ulit.
And to your point, Bobby, this attack, it's marami namang kaguluhan sa Mindanao. Diba? Not that we're painting Mindanao with that one brush. But you also make the point na marami namang hindi napapansin. But now, precisely because this has that religious context and this was at a Catholic venue, it caught the attention of a national audience. All the more that we could, the one thing that could also happen here is that audience, that national audience might as well be asking and reflecting on these bigger questions. Muli, ako po si Roby Alampay, Puma Podcast. Thank you again for joining us in this episode of Teka Teka. Follow Puma Podcast and Teka Teka on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and kung saan man kayo Puma Podcast. This episode was edited by myself, and I was joined in this interview by Veronica. This podcast was produced by Pidoy Blanco. If you liked this episode, please do share it with a friend. Malaking bagay na po sa amin yan. Maraming salamat.